Good morning, everyone. My name is Sonji Patrick, and thank you for joining us for our very first Hafia Wellness webinar on the COVID-19 vaccine. It is my pleasure to introduce your host for this morning, Dr. Cheryl Smichael. She is one of the founding members of STEM is Child's Play, along with my other colleague, Michelle Massey. And she is going to be facilitating the program and introducing our guest speaker. Cheryl will be handling questions from the audience, and we will both be monitoring the chat, so feel free to put your questions in the chat. Dr. Smichael is committed to all of our good health, especially, health for people of color. We are suffering in this community with this pandemic, and, we join forces to try to get the most timely, truthful, fact-based, science-based information out to you today. So without further ado, I turn it over to you, Cheryl.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. I appreciate it. Welcome. Bienvenido a Cuaba. We are so excited to have you join us for this discussion about a timely health-focused topic, COVID, the vaccine. Will you take it? As you know, we are all sharing in this global pandemic, and we're trying to figure out minute to minute what's the right protocol for us. And in order to do that, you need to be an informed medical consumer. And that's really our focus. In particular, we're honing in on a demographic that sometimes is underrepresented and misled and misinformed, and that is the demographic of 50 and over, of people of color and their allies. And so I'm happy to introduce an expert in the field. Our guest today is Dr. Joan Culpepper Morgan. She and I are both native daughters of the Bronx, Bronx Science, and Seven Sister School. She is an alumna of Smith College, and she also went to medical school at Cornell University. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about Dr. Culpepper Morgan's background. She served in the vestry of the historic African-American St. Luke's Episcopal Church in New Haven, Connecticut, and she was also a senior and junior warden. She was the director of GI outcome study for the statewide Connecticut peer review organization. And she was also the associate program director and then program director of the GI fellowship at the Norwalk Hospital. So her background is in GI. And so that is really an area that is important for us because there are a lot of issues that can affect that area of the body if we're not vigilant. Now, currently, she is the program director for the GI Fellowship at Harlem Hospital. We know that Harlem Hospital is really in the center of this fight in New York City against the pandemic. So we are happy to have her expertise to share with you today. And I turn the program over to Dr. Joan Culpepper Morgan.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Smichael. Thank you, all of the developers of STEM is Child's Play. I think that this is a really fantastic effort, and educating ourselves is the only way that we're going to make it through this pandemic. And as long as we keep doing that in earnest and in truth and in brother and sisterhood, that's the only way that we're going to make it forward. So the question on the table is COVID vaccine, will you take it? The first thing I think we need to talk about is, what is the COVID infection? The COVID infection is an airborne inhaled virus. It attaches itself to the cell membrane through an outer spike protein. So we all have seen the cartoons of the virus. It looks like it has all of these spikes. These spikes attach itself to the cells inside of our body, and that's how the COVID virus is so sticky and so virulent and so able to do damage. It doesn't just roll through, it attaches itself very securely. And through that attachment, it is able to do damage to multiple organ systems, including the lungs, the heart, the brain. We'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in a bit. Now, moving on, you may have symptoms from the COVID virus that will appear anywhere from 2 days to 14 days after exposure. And so this is important to realize. Just the day that you're exposed to someone with COVID is not the day that you're going to have symptoms. You may have the traditional flu-like symptoms, fever or chills, cough, a little bit of shortness of breath, some tiredness, fatigue, aches in your muscles, headache, sore throat, congestion, runny nose, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. And these are things that you may say, well, I'm used to these things. I've seen these things before. They happen in a flu. But one set of symptoms that is fairly unique to the COVID virus is the loss of taste or smell. And this is oftentimes without any nose congestion. So it's not like your nose is stuffy and you can't smell. Your nose is clear, but you still can't smell anything. And when that happens, that's almost certainly related to the COVID-19 or coronavirus infection. And I want to mention at this point that there are certain signs, emergency signs, that you should not ignore. Because frequently if we have a cold or we have the flu, we say, well, I'll just stay home, take a little soup, rest up, and I'll be fine. But if you have any of the following symptoms, serious trouble breathing, you can't walk up a flight of stairs, persistent pain or pressure in your chest, new onset of confusion, inability to wake someone up, or inability for you yourself to stay awake, or bluish discoloration of your lips or of your face. These are serious indications of lack of oxygen and mean that you need to go to the emergency room and seek more advanced care than what you're able to give yourself at home. So I want to put this up here to give you an example of the long-term damage that can be done by COVID. The organ that is frequently thought of as the most vulnerable, which is the lung. And it makes sense because the lung is very susceptible to deprivation of oxygen. This here is a normal chest CT. This is the way it should, the lungs should look, nice and black in these areas. And this is a lung that has been damaged by COVID. You see these little gray areas in the lung, these little hazy areas. We call those ground glass opacities. This is something that can happen to you after having had COVID infection. And I will tell you that this is something that happened to me. I thought that I had a very mild case of COVID in March, and I would tell anybody that. I'd say, oh yes, yeah, I had the virus, and I lost my sense of taste, and but I recovered. I was back to work in 2 weeks. But I never did feel like my exercise tolerance was back to where it was before, and come to find out recently that yes, I have ground glass opacities in my lung. So now, permanent lung damage, not expected to have, not a smoker, thinking that my lungs was something that I didn't have to worry about. But this is something that COVID can do, which is very much unlike the flu. It can also affect your heart. We have NBA players who have had a long-lasting myocarditis, and especially the elderly are at risk for developing long-term brain problems because of deprivation of oxygen, acceleration of dementia, and again, things that we didn't anticipate, things that you don't see in a regular flu or virus. So I would like to pause after this slide, but this is very important for us to look at the disparity between the effect of COVID on populations of color in this country. And it's almost the rates of infection, hospitalization, and death are almost triple for Black, Hispanic, and Native American populations. So this is very scary. So everything that I've told you is nearly triple for communities of color. When we talk about numbers And I think that people, almost everybody knows someone who died from COVID. Almost everyone knows someone who's gotten sick from COVID. But do realize that more people have died this 1 year from COVID than died in all of World War II. World War II spanned 4 years, 6 years, not sure, but it was definitely more than 1 year. And we're over 400,000 people who have lost their lives, with the vast majority of those being individuals of color. So now we are faced with having something that we can do that will help us, which is the vaccine. And I'm going to be talking a lot about the mRNA vaccine. And the question on the table is, will you take it? So I will pause here, because I know that we were going to put some questions out to have people say yay or nay. So I'm going to stop sharing my content.
Sure. Thank you so much for the information. I'm happy to get the information, because even just this morning I was watching the news, and there was a gentleman who I think lives in Massachusetts or Maine. I can't remember which state. I don't know if you just heard about it this morning, but he received his second dose of the vaccination, but apparently has now tested positive for COVID. So maybe you're covering that, Dr. Culpepper, a little bit later in the presentation, but you know, how effective really is the vaccine? Do we know yet?
So the vaccine, we know all of the vaccines, I should say the first two vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, which are both based on messenger RNA, are 80 to 90% effective. And I should say 90% effective. The Johnson & Johnson just released its data. It is 60 to 70% effective. And here's the other thing to realize, that the virus can enter your body. I think the question is, will you get terribly sick from it? So the fact that people are infected is only half the story. Or I shouldn't say infected. The fact that they've tested positive is half the story. Whether they get sick or not is the other half of the story. So the vaccine is supposed to have two effects. It's supposed to decrease your chances of getting infected, but if infected, your chances of getting severe disease are supposed to be severely limited. And I think that's where the vaccine is most effective. So even I believe our congressman in Harlem, Congressman Espaillat, who had one dose of the vaccine, he became infected. He's doing fine. And he's still, ready to get his second dose, but he has not had the full-blown disease, and that's the important part of it.
So I want to talk about, Dr. Culpepper, this emphasis on trying to have equity and social justice during this process of vaccination. The president wants to do 100 million, I think in I don't know what the time period is, but he wants to do a tremendous amount. Cuomo is saying we have distribution issues. And so what are you thinking about how well we're getting people who are most vulnerable access to the vaccine, knowing that Yankee Stadium now is going to be an access point for the vaccine?
I would have to say that I think that they're doing a good job, but I think that one of the things that they underestimated is the need for online access to book these appointments. And what happened in Washington Heights in Harlem, that Columbia University services Washington Heights, those of you who are not from the New York area, and many people who were from outside of New York City who were very online savvy and they didn't have areas to book in their own neighborhoods. They were booking in Washington Heights. So they were showing up at Columbia and they were taking the slots that should have gone for the Harlem community. And fortunately, the local officials said, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? This is We need to have these vaccine doses available for our vulnerable population. So they've limited it to, you have to be a New York City resident. And they wanted to reserve, and they've reserved 65% of those doses for Harlem residents. But these are the kinds of barriers that exist. So it's not just setting up the bricks and mortar in the neighborhoods. You also need to facilitate making appointments for our seniors, many of whom do not have computer access for them to be able to get these appointments.
Thank you so much. And so we have another question from Michelle Massey.
Dr. Culpepper, is there any population who should not take the vaccine?
In point of fact, there really isn't a population. There are some people who have trouble with vaccines in general, and those people have trouble with the vehicle that the vaccine is delivered in. These are people who have egg white allergies and so forth. And those people may be in danger of what's known as anaphylaxis, which is a severe allergic reaction in which your blood pressure drops, your throat closes, and you're in need of epinephrine in order to reverse those things from happening. Those people perhaps should wait until alternative vaccines are developed. So even for example, flu vaccine, there are alternative flu vaccines that are developed in other vehicles that allow people who are known to have anaphylaxis as a result of any vaccine to be able to avoid those severe reactions. But I would say, in terms of, are there any medical conditions that I would say, oh no, you should not take the vaccine? No, I don't see that there are any. The only ones I would worry about are people who are extremely allergic to vaccine injections in general.
Thank you for this discussion. The first half has been fascinating. One, in defining what COVID is. Two, the impact of COVID in terms of our internal organs, the adverse impact to specific populations, the differentiation of what the vaccine can do, and how to really look at that holistically when we hear news articles and reports to the contrary. And you, before you move to your next portion of the program, you did offer a personal glimpse with your own experience with COVID, saying that you have survived the infection. Can you talk a little bit more about that as you move into the discussion of how the vaccine works?
Yes, I would say that, you know, many of my colleagues, as you can imagine, were infected early on. And I think before we knew the value of masks, the value of masking all the time, I would tell you, I live in Connecticut and I work in New York City. So I travel on a commuter train. And even though I wore masks at work, I did not wear masks while I was commuting. And I'm pretty sure that's how I got the infection. When I got it, I was extremely fatigued. It was like no other tiredness that I had ever experienced, but didn't feel especially short of breath, which is why I was actually quite surprised that I have as much lung damage as I have. Right now, I'm currently being treated as an asthmatic. I've never had asthma. My brother has asthma. So maybe I had a family predisposition, but these are things that, again, a normal flu would not have done this to me. This is a very different virus with some very different capabilities. I've had several colleagues who were much sicker than I was, a couple of colleagues who have not come back to work at all. So I do think it's something we have to take seriously, and we have to look at differently than we have before. I certainly have, and I think that we have to really protect ourselves because of that.
Well, I appreciate you offering this personal glimpse of your experience with COVID. And we just want to give a comment, an update to what you talked about in terms of mass transportation. Michelle?
Just today on the news, the CDC has made it mandatory starting Monday for masks on public transportation. So I think that this might be the reason why, and it may be a way to stop the spread.
No, I agree with that. The Chinese have some very interesting studies about mass transit and how people get infected, and it's not really what you would expect. Some of it has to do with the way in which these conveyances are ventilated. When you are in line of the ventilation, so the person who's infected could be in the front of the train, you could be in the back of the train, the ventilation is blowing towards you. The person who is sitting next to the infected person doesn't get infected. You get infected, you're in the back of the train. So, you may think, oh, well, I'm going to sit in the back and I'm going to, be away from everybody and I'm going to be safe. It doesn't work that way. So there are many very interesting things that we're finding about the way this thing travels over the air. And yes, people who are on the train have to keep themselves masked. Now, I will tell you, like I said, I commuting is down. I think I'm one of 10 people on the train. Okay, I mean, it's just nobody is commuting anymore. Everybody who has to commute is driving, and people are still very afraid of that. But yes, the CDC now is able to put out the kinds of things that should have been out before to protect the public, masking everybody who's on a public conveyance.
Thank you. This has been a very robust discussion. It's sort of like riding alongside a bus, right? The COVID's the bus, and we're trying to keep up, and we're learning things as we go. And it's just the nature of the beast. Before you continue, I just want to say we thank you for being on the front line and for what you do. I know it's an honor and a privilege, but we recognize with great gratitude what you and your colleagues are doing. I turn the floor over to you to continue your discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so as we were talking about, it's a big question. People are wondering whether or not whether they're really going to take this vaccine. So let's talk a little bit about this mRNA vaccine. So mRNA is what the body uses, the template that the body uses to create proteins. And what the scientists have done is they've isolated the mRNA for the spike protein, only the spike protein. They inject that into your muscle. It's a very small amount. Your body then makes the protein. Your body then makes antibodies to the protein. And then those antibodies protect you from allowing the virus to enter the various cells within your body, so that the virus can't do what it normally does to damage the lungs, damage the heart, etc. I want to mention right here that mRNA of any kind cannot transform your DNA. That's kind of an urban legend that's out there. That's nonsense. That's nonsense because we don't have an enzyme that we need in order to do that. It cannot be done. The virus vaccine is very important so that 70% of us at least, if 70% of us at least have taken the vaccine and have immunity, then we have herd immunity, and then we protect the entire community. We protect the country. But I mean, this seems like, okay, this seems easy, but people are very reluctant to embark on this, shall we say, collective responsibility. And why is that? The main reason for that is lack of trust. So I'm going to talk a lot about trust because we're living in an era where trust has been eroded on several levels and about many, many things. As a patient, you need to be able to trust your physician. You want to share in that decision making. People feel that they haven't been involved. They're not participants in this decision. Decision has been made for them. People don't trust the government oversight of the process. They're like, you know, this thing has sounded very chaotic. It's been developed too fast. What's really going on? They don't trust the drug companies. Drug companies are just out to make money. I don't believe that they're really out for my own self-interest. And then they don't trust the scientists anymore. And that's an unfortunate thing. And many of us are, you know, we are from the Bronx High School of Science, so we do trust science and scientists, but we've heard too many contradictions, and people are very wary of the contradictions that they've heard. But I do want to delve into this issue of decision making. And in medicine, we call this weighing the risks and the benefits. How do we evaluate the information that we have? Either we trust the information, we trust the facts, or we doubt the facts and we think we think that we're being told lies. We trust individuals and institutions that are consistent, that are kind to us, that are compassionate to us, and we doubt those that harm us, that we're afraid of, that give us inconsistent information. And if we don't feel like we can evaluate those people or those institutions, then we ask our surrogates. So our surrogates are frequently our doctors, our clergy, our elected officials, our family and friends, and unfortunately, social media. And what occurs when we ask all of these different people is we get inconsistent responses. And as a result, we have more doubt and we are then forced back into inaction. When we have doubt, there is inaction. And then we want to add another layer on this that applies to African Americans, that in spite of our worst outcomes, our threefold worst outcomes, we have a history of unethical medical treatment in this country. Top among those is the Tuskegee syphilis experiment from 1932 to 1972, where participants told they were being treated for the disease when in fact they were simply being observed. So harm and lies occurred here. There is the unfortunate story of Henrietta Lacks, whose cells were used to develop a very important cell line in biology research, but these cells were harvested without her knowledge or compensation. And then going way back into the times of slavery, where J. Marion Sims perfected surgical GYN techniques on slave women. Again, it was felt that doing experimentation on African Americans was accepted. So this, as said on the previous slide, magnifies or adds an extra layer of doubt and distrust and fear, and as a result, lack of activity. I want to leave with this last slide to talk about what we're really hoping will happen. We know that if you're infected with COVID, it's an airborne virus. If you don't wear a vaccine, if you don't take the vaccine or wear a mask, three things can happen. If you get infected, you might infect someone else. You might do fine, but you can infect a vulnerable person who might actually get sick and die. You yourself could develop permanent organ damage of your lungs, of your heart, of your brain. And of course, you could die. This virus, we know these are the facts. These are the risks. If you take the vaccine and you wear a mask, the chances of these other things happening are very slim. Now, Other people have said, well, you know, there are other things that could happen, I think, from taking this vaccine. The vaccine hasn't been around long enough. Long term, this might cause some other problems. That's always possible. That we can always imagine all sorts of things. But these things down here, we don't have to imagine. These things are absolutely true. If you take the vaccine and wear a mask, and we as a community develop herd immunity, chances are society will be able to get back to normal, and we will all be safe, and we can avoid these problems. And again, very important to realize, we as African Americans, as communities of color, threefold increased risk of infection, as well as hospitalization, and as well as death. And
Dr. Culpepper, I can't thank you enough for this high quality medical discussion in which you separated fact from fiction and really gave us the information to make an informed decision, with the caveat that action and right action is not only going to accrue to one person, but to the collective. This is really the first time that we're in this position where the way we manage our healthcare has an impact on the community. I don't think we've been in this position in my lifetime. And so it's very important to stay informed, to be able to weigh the information, as you say, and to limit, you know, the numbers of people that you seek information from, and go to trusted sources, right? I have a friend who only, if it doesn't come from Johns Hopkins, she doesn't believe it, right? And she'll, well, that's not what Johns Hopkins said. And initially when this was all coming to the fore, I was like, okay, well, Johns Hopkins, all right. But I understand now, you have to sort of look for those resources that you know have a history and a track record for presenting information that's both accurate and as truthful as they know it to be. So quality information is very key. And I wanted to say to you, while we move into the Q&A section, I wanted to ask you about how one should think about the vaccine in light of the additional strains that are being reported, the South African strain, the Brazilian strain, the UK strain. It seems as if there are going to be a proliferation now. You know, a month ago, you only had to worry about, should I take the vaccine for what's happening in America? Now you're saying, okay, should I take the vaccine, and how protected will I be if I'm exposed to some of these other strains that have now landed in the US?
Well, quite frankly, I was extremely worried because one, I had COVID. Two, they said if you've had COVID, you could get it again with one of the new strains. And I said, oh no. I'm not, you know, I don't know what this thing would do to me now. And I think that people have to keep that in mind. The good news is the Moderna vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine seems to have very good activity at preventing the virus. Again, the vaccine is targeting those spike proteins. And if the spike proteins cannot attach, then you're not going to get infected. So the spike proteins for these new variants seem to be similar enough that the old vaccines are working well. The new vaccine that has been approved, which is the Johnson & Johnson, seems not to be as effective as the Modernas and the Pfizer. However, it's still extremely effective, and it's one dose, so that many people are feeling that that's just going to be easier for people. If people have to make 2 appointments, they're just less likely to comply. If they only have to make 1 appointment, then they're probably going to comply with that much more easily. But it is even more important. And so I think people have to realize that the virus gets into your body, the virus replicates, and then the virus learns things. It's like, oh, well, this person's got this way of fighting me, that person has this way of fighting me. As it replicates, it changes itself, and that's how we get variants. So preventing infection prevents variants. Okay, so the more we wait to develop herd immunity, the longer we give the virus a chance. Viruses are brilliant, and I don't know how this thing happened in biology, but it is a learning process. These little organisms learn how to circumvent our immune process, and they can only do that while they're replicating, and they only replicate inside the body. So the idea is to prevent, and I should say it's really technically inside the cells of the body. So it's like you could breathe it in, it could be in your body, but it could float around until it dies and not able to replicate. But you block it with the antibody, and it can't replicate, and it can't learn, and it can't become something different. So this is where we have to help ourselves and help the next group of people by stopping the virus in its tracks by taking the vaccine. A lot of people are looking at this kind of very selfishly and saying, well, me and my body, I don't want to put things in my body. I know my body. I don't want to put things in my body, on my body. I'm strong. I mean, all of that. You may have an immune system. You take the virus in and it protects you. But the virus looks at that and says, well, maybe I need to tweak myself a little bit so that I can bypass that the next time I move along. So there are all of these things going on that a simple matter of taking a vaccine and antibody will protect us all.
Excellent. Thank you so very much for simplifying what is obviously a complex immunological response. I appreciate that. Any other questions from our audience?
Thanks. I was trying to find the raise hand function and couldn't do it quickly enough. So I have a question regarding the schedule of when vaccines will be available to certain groups of people. I've looked at the New York State website, and I'm very clear on what's in phase 1 and 1A and 1B. I'm a recent cancer survivor. I just finished chemotherapy treatments last month, so I'm not currently in treatment, but I reached out to my oncologist's office just yesterday to see if they were in possession of any vaccines, and if so, would I be eligible to have one, even though I'm not currently in treatment. I was informed that the cancer center, I go to White Plains Cancer Center, they don't have any vaccines there, and they weren't aware of when they were going to get them from the state. So I was just wondering what your perspective is as a hospital administrator or a physician who works in a hospital, and what the rollout is or plans are for people who maybe fall into my category where I'm not currently in treatment, but my immune system is probably still a bit compromised right now.
Yeah, no, it's a very unfortunate situation, because I will tell you that the vaccine, there are many people for whom the vaccine is available to them who are refusing the vaccine. And then there are people like yourself who would like to take the vaccine who can't find a way to get the vaccine. And that's public policy. And I think that we have to talk to our elected officials. A lot of people find our mayor a little hard to take, Bill de Blasio, New York, right? And but Big Bill, he's very aggressive, and he's just trying to get everybody. He's trying to get everybody and anybody the vaccine who wants the vaccine. And then he and the governor are constantly at each other's throats about the order of things. I love Mario, but he's a control freak. So he's really, he said, no, the cops wanted to get it. He said, no, not giving it to the cops. It's like, okay, well, we'll just give it to whoever wants to get it. That's my thing. I think there's so many people who don't want to get it. Give it to the people who want to get it. And the people who don't want to get it, just let them stay home and think about what they have to think about. But it's it's a public policy thing, and I don't know that I have an easy answer for that, except to say contact your local officials
Yeah.
and have them pressure the governor because he really controls um, when the stores come in from the federal government. He's going to control what the priorities are.
Thank you. Maybe I'll call him myself.
And also, I would add, Stewart Andrea Cousins, she's now the leader of the Senate, New York State Legislature. She's got a big job. I would call her office.
Actually, interestingly, I have a connection to her. One of her daughter is best friends with one of my friend's little sisters. So, so yeah, I could probably get a question to her
Absolutely.
quickly. Thank you.
Absolutely. And her daughter's very active on LinkedIn. So that's what I would do.
Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions? So I know that Sanji, I'm going to turn the floor to you because I know you have, Bilal.
Bilal has a question.
Yeah, I have a question. I hope the question is not out of place for Dr. Morgan, because on one of your slides, you listed some of the fears or concerns of the general population about whether or not they should take the vaccine. And I was wondering, because this was a concern of mine, and I work in the field, but I was wondering, what is your opinion on the difference between the vaccine coming to the public by way of the emergency use authorization or the ordinary way of FDA approval, and about that gap between putting it out as the emergency use or, waiting until it gets the approval, understanding that we're in a critical situation with the virus.
Right. I do think that the emergency use authorization is entirely appropriate. I think given the fact that this is a public health emergency, I think that we just did not have the time to allot. These viruses, though, have been in these vaccines rather have been in testing for over a year. So that the medium-term effects and side effects really have been and are being looked at. So the first group of people that got those vaccines are currently being studied in terms of their medium and semi-long-term effects. I look at it the same way. Every once in a while, I'll have a patient who has a disease and I want to use a medication off-label, and I just say, I'm going to do it. It needs to be done because that person's going to be dead in 2 months. So it's really the same kind of situation. I mean, over 400,000 people dead. I mean, people don't really realize that. That's definitely more people than have died from colon cancer. Colon cancer is a big thing that I do, colon cancer prevention and so forth. It has dwarfed the cancers in terms of causing death. That's amazing in this country. So to try to do something to prevent it, and even though it is quicker than what we have normally seen, I'm okay with it. I think that we just do need this mass vaccination. I just wanted to, for New Yorkers, I have my assistant here has given me the vaccine hotline number for New York, 1-877-VAX-4-NYC, VAX-4-NYC, and that you can make appointments there there are places that have vaccine that may not necessarily be on the regular radar. So there's also 1-833-NYS-4-VAX. That's state, that's the state, okay? So one is New York City and the other is the state. I'll say it again, 1-877-VAX-4-NYC, New York City, and 1-833-NYS-4-VAX, VAX.
Thank you so very much. I put both of those in the chat.
So my question regarding the vaccines are for the two vaccines that are currently being used. How long, once you take the two doses, are they saying the vaccines are effective for? Like, would you need a booster? That's my first question. My second question is the J&J new vaccine coming out also an mRNA vaccine?
Okay, to answer your first question is unknown. Will we be needing boosters? Possibly. We possibly will be needing boosters. We possibly will, there'll be other variants for which we might need a different booster. Will we be in a situation like the flu vaccine where every year we will have to take another vaccine? That's certainly a possibility. That is unknown at this point in time. In terms of, yes, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, I believe, is also an mRNA vaccine. It has the advantage, like I said, of being one dose, and it is also more temperature stable. It does not require, Pfizer required minus 90 degrees. And those of you who have done research know that minus 90, we didn't even have a minus 90 in the lab that I did research. And the Moderna required minus 70. Most labs had a minus 70, but even that, those things are expensive, and then you have to have them all over the place. Yeah, you know, that gives you pause. It's like, do y'all really have did you pay the electric bill? Is your freezer working? What's going on? But the Johnson & Johnson is just a regular refrigerator. So that really makes things much more egalitarian. You know, the likelihood of being able to get it into remote areas is certainly much more likely.
A lot of people are influenced by the Tuskegee Institute debacle, and I didn't realize it was 40 years. And it was in 72. I can recall 72. You know, like my mother's going to be 83. She had already said she was going to take the vaccine. Now, she's waffling, right? And I'm trying to tell her they're not going to change the stores when you come up to get your arm jabbed. That's impossible. Like it's an assembly line. So, right. What can we say to people who just think somehow, by some mysterious means, they're not going to get the right vaccine?
Wow. Yeah, no, it is a very difficult thing. The effects of Tuskegee, and I just want to mention this, that the doctors and nurses that perpetrated Tuskegee were Black doctors and nurses as well as white doctors and nurses. So Tuskegee Institute approved this. The NMA approved this study. It was going up until the time that at least I was in high school, which is phenomenal to me. So the level of distrust for the medical community is deserving. We can't really get around that. I think that's why we have elected officials, like President Obama and Vice President Harris taking the vaccine, showing people that they are actually taking the vaccine, and setting an example. I think the only way that some people are going to do it is if they see someone that they know and trust getting the vaccine. For some people, it's an exalted person, and for some people, it's a regular person. They might say, "Well, I want to see my pastor get one. I want to see my imam get one. If they get one, then I'll get one." And so I think that those of us who are in positions of leadership or influence have to should share our stories. When I got my vaccine, I posted it on Facebook and said, I had the infection, got the vaccine, and when I get my second dose, I will also post that on Facebook for whoever is watching me or not watching me. I think that those little things are important. So she may need to see somebody that she knows get it, or be told, well, Miss So and So got it, and she might say, oh, really? And say, yeah, she's fine. So that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I had a comment again towards some of the people's apprehension about the vaccine. And I think a lot of it comes from they don't understand the language of the scientists. When the scientists talk, it's just like womp womp what. They don't understand any of it. So they have to work more so just on a straight trust. And so some of my friends, they call me, and when they express their hesitation, I have to say that some of it is justified from what we've lived through, and then I have to try and calm their fears with an understanding. Try to bring the understanding to a base level where they can understand. And I think this is where the people just not getting it, because nobody's talking to them in a way that they can understand. You just have one person after the next saying the same medical terminology, the same immunological terminology, and there's still months pass by. They still don't.
That's absolutely true, and that's why I had that slide about trust and doubt. Quite often, and having been a physician for over 30 years, and having to explain procedures to people don't really know what you're about to do to them. And for example, look, if I had to have my knee replaced, I don't know what a knee replacement really is. I mean, I have a vague idea, but I don't know all of the things that could possibly go wrong and why they could go wrong and this and that. What do I know? I know that I chose a guy or a gal whom I trust, and they look like they're not going to hurt me, and they look like they're going to do the best thing for me. And that if there was a reason I shouldn't have this done, they would tell me. It's a matter, most of medicine is a matter of trust. And we're never going to know everything that we need to know about everything. It's not possible. We're taking these leaps of faith, and the problem with now, this is a tremendous leap of faith in an atmosphere where we don't trust anybody. I think people shouldn't underestimate the effect of not trusting your public officials, not trusting the New York Times, fake news, all of this in the atmosphere. It's an atmosphere of not trusting. So to then say, now I want you to let me take a needle and inject this thing into your body. It's like, wait, it's too much. It's too much for people right now. And I get that. But I'm just hoping that if people understand that that's what they're looking at, that they've always made these decisions based on trust, not so much based on the science that they understand or don't understand, but whether they believe that this is the right thing, this is a good thing to do for society, this is my responsibility. I think you're a good person, a good doctor, and we're in this together. And that's where we are. We're not. None of us are virologists. We're not Fauci's. You know what I mean? We don't understand it at that level. But we say, you know what? Society's in a bad way. Let's do the best we can as individuals.
Thank you for that question, Bilal, and I thank you for that explanation. I'm curious, by a show of hands, people who came into this room today, how many of you were on the fence about taking the vaccine? How many of you have been persuaded to take the vaccine? And how many of you plan to take the vaccine? Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Sanji,
I
what
would
would you
have to
like
ask,
to ask?
I would have to actually quantify my saying that I'm going to take the vaccine if it's possible, because for me, you know, I'm in probably the third phase of vaccine eligibility, and that sits well with me because I don't want to be in the first phase because of my apprehension about the rush to use. And I understand that it has to be done because we're in a crisis. But now that I'm in the third phase, I can sit back and kind of watch. And that just, you know, soothes my soul, you know, that I can just watch. But, you know, when it comes my turn, I'm going to step up and take it.
I agree.
Thank you for that. Appreciate the honesty that we're having in today's discussion. Okay, Sanji, what would you like to ask?
So first, a quick comment. I think that, you know, Dr. Morgan, your presentation was so important because it was so relatable and digestible. And I think that we have to have more of these conversations because so many people do not really understand how how the illness is transmitted and how it manifests in the body. And then they don't understand how the vaccine is supposed to work. So I really appreciate and thank you for a very plain spoken presentation so that we can, you know, have, you know, a level of you know, honest and factual understanding. My question is, a lot of people on my Facebook feed are very uh, woke people. I don't have another word to use for it. So a lot of people before the vaccine came out and while we were really in the throes, we're still in the throes of this pandemic in the spring, started, you know, really relying on some old school immunity boosting methods, you know, using different like, you know, what is that, black elderberry, the sambucus is one of the things, boosting with different, you know, probiotics and different antioxidants and vitamins, for example. I mean, we all know how important nutrition is and how important all of these things, you know, play to help boost our immune system. But what do you say to people who say, I am going to boost my immune system by doing all of these, you know, detoxification protocols and, you know, mass, you know, uh, ingestion of, you know, certain elixirs, you know, that are nutrient dense, so that I can, you know, make sure I don't get sick or catch, you know, COVID-19 versus getting the vaccine for it. What do you say to people like that? Because I see that a lot on my feed and I think the information is useful, but, you know, but it's still not a vaccine.
Right. And the thing is, it's not all of that is harmful. Some of it is, not all of it is. Much of it is a non-specific, it's really like taking a sledgehammer to a fly on the wall. You might get the fly, but then you just might end up with a big hole in the wall. So is there a benefit to taking antioxidants? Sure. I'm a big proponent of probiotics. Sure. Is that specifically going to prevent you from getting the virus? No. And at this point in time, and it gets back to doubt. Part of the doubts that we have about the approach that we're taking is the lack of knowledge that we have, specific knowledge that we have about the virus. So if I tell you, you know what, in order for you not to have a heart attack, you need to stop smoking. You need to control your blood pressure. You need to stop eating certain foods and bring down your cholesterol. All of these things that I'm saying with confidence come from years and years of research and observation and so forth to be able to make specific recommendations. What people want to know is, tell me that if I am over 65 with diabetes and hypertension, I will get the virus. And if I don't have those things, I won't get the virus. And that's what medicine cannot say right now. You have 25-year-old people dying from this virus who were previously healthy and running marathons and juicing and doing all the juices and berries, and they still get it and they still die. So I'm not going to tell somebody that those things are not helpful. They may be helpful, but we don't know that they're helpful. I can only tell you what I know, that a very specific treatment, which is a vaccine that is tailored to this particular virus and really just at the level of preventing it from getting into your cells, that is effective. Now, maybe if you're on high doses of antioxidants, you're going to have a less severe disease than somebody else. That's possible. But I'm not gonna, I really don't dissuade people about those things, but I try to say, I just don't know that will work for everyone. I mean, I used to tell people I drank green tea. That was good for me. I mean, I felt good when I had my infection. I drank green tea, and I tell people to drink green tea because it worked for me. But that doesn't mean that it's going to prevent the virus. But all I can say is that it made me feel better. So unfortunately, we're in an era of so many unknowns that people don't feel comfortable, and they would rather rely on things that they know. They know yogurt, they know green tea, they know antioxidants. It's like the rest of that stuff, this mRNA virus thing, whatever that is not something that people know. They don't feel comfortable with it. But it's not specific. Tell them you can keep doing those things, but it's not specific.
Well, we have had a robust discussion, and we cannot thank our audience or our guests enough for really promoting this critical issue and sifting through the fact, the fiction, and ambiguity around this pandemic, and also its the tools to fight against it. We only hope that we have demystified it, that we have acknowledged some of the difficulties in weighing the risks, but that when it's all said and done, we take the leap of faith with what we know is out there today to combat it, not just for us, but for those we love and those who share this planet with us. I thank you, Dr. Culpepper Morgan.
You're very welcome.
You made us proud at Bronx Science and at the Seven Sister level. And we say, keep fighting the good fight, take good care of yourself. And thank you so very much. And thank you, my dear audience. Hope to see you soon, where we continue to look at additional topics that affect you and I and those that we associate with. So thank you so much for your time. It's been a real blast. Bye now.
Thank you.
And come back next month.